Thank you for joining us today. The Our Driving Concern Employer Traffic Safety Program is pleased to be able to offer the webinar, Navigating the Crossroads, How to Keep Your Employees Safe at Intersections. I want to welcome our presenters this afternoon, Kurt Kraft, Traffic Operations Manager and City Traffic Engineer with the City of Tulsa, and Eddy Tijerina, Traffic and Development Supervisor with the Oklahoma Safety Council. A few things to note before we get started. Since we are recording this webinar, would everyone please hit *6 to make sure that you're muted if you called in via telephone. This will silence any background noise to ensure the quality of the audio and assure that you have confidentiality on your end. You do have the ability to type questions during the webinar using the chat function, and the presenters will address questions at the end. A PDF of the presentation was made available for your note-taking, and if you had any problems printing it off, please let me know. If you should encounter any problems or issues, please type a message and let me know, and I'll help you resolve them. The presenters' contact information will be available on the last slide, and there's a very brief post-event survey at the conclusion of the webinar. Because this program is funded through grant dollars and provided at no cost to employers, we would greatly appreciate your feedback. With that, I welcome Kurt and Eddy, and I'll turn it over to them to begin.
Thank you, Deanne. Hey, this is Eddy Tijerina and
Kurt Kraft.
And we're very happy you came to join us today to talk about intersection safety. We're very pleased to have Kurt with us today. He's been working with the City of Tulsa. How long, Kurt?
18 years.
18 years, and before that, you were with Oklahoma City, right?
Before that, with Oklahoma City, also worked for national and local consulting firms. So, been in the business about 30 years.
So we're very lucky to have him here to answer any of your questions about, especially about traffic engineering. So let's go ahead and get started with the next slide. So we're going to talk about 3 collision risks at intersections today. I know there's a lot more, but we're going to focus on 3 today, and we're going to focus on urban intersections, and hopefully later in another webinar we can talk about rural intersections, which are very dangerous as well. But the 3 issues that we're going to focus on today are red light running, left turns, and rear-ending. And we'll be using solutions using engineering and education. So we'll look at the causes, and then we'll look at the how engineering and education can help us with strategies and solutions to solve some of these problems for employers today who may have fleets that have issues with intersections, or just keep them safe during using intersections. So, Kurt, I'm going to ask you this question. What makes intersections so dangerous?
So, a couple things of intersections. Well, driver error makes it dangerous. By and large, a lot of accidents are just driver-related, not paying attention, of course, running red lights, as we kind of alluded to. But at a standard intersection, there are 32 conflict points. And there's a graphic up. This one actually only shows 28. There's about 4 in the middle it's not showing. But that's part of the issue with an intersection is drivers have to negotiate these.
Can you speak to road and weather conditions as well?
Well, and of course, road and weather conditions can make it even harder. Foggy conditions, it could be hard to see other drivers, hard to see the traffic signal indications themselves. Same thing, wet weather, you can skid into another driver or hydroplane. If you're going down an incline, a lot of times road surfaces can become kind of polished, especially on asphalt. So you may not have the skid resistance you think when you go to brake.
Kurt, I was at an intersection the other day, and it was facing west, and I was stopped at a stoplight, and I could not see the traffic signal because the sun was in the spot. Mm-hmm. Engineering-wise, what are you guys trying to do when that happens?
Back plates are one technique we use. Those are the black borders around the edges of the traffic signal. Those are used to try to help compensate for that. Certain times of year when the sun gets at a good angle where it lines up with the indications, it can be hard to see. And, you know, you want to use bright indications. Everybody's going to LED signals nowadays. I know when they first came out, there were some brands that had, would get kind of a haze on them when they got old. And we had an intersection. It was very hard to see when the sun got to a certain angle, and got some complaints. We went out and we didn't catch it at first because the sun wasn't at the same angle, but we had to change out all the LEDs at the intersection with brighter ones.
Okay. Well, as you can see, there are 32 points of conflicts at an intersection, so that is the main reason why intersections are so dangerous, and important that we discuss this with our employees. Whoops, wrong way. So let's focus in on our first issue, which is red light running. The causes, obviously distractions. Everybody's on a cell phone today, it seems like. If it's hands-free or handheld, it does not matter. And then in a hurry, speed, going too fast, or basically trying to beat the light, which is an aggressive behavior, at-risk behavior. And then finally, we'll talk a little bit about signal color and timing recognition and how this can help your employees understand when a light may turn from yellow to red, or from green, yellow to red during their time at that, coming up to that intersection. So some strategies and solutions. Kurt, let's talk a little bit about road design and how road design is helping us to have more safe intersections.
Okay, well, we have roundabouts mentioned up here. That's one technique that's starting to become more popular in the United States, has been in Europe quite a bit. At a roundabout, we mentioned there's 32 points of conflict, vehicular to vehicular conflict at a standard intersection. With a roundabout, there's only 8. And those points of conflict are basically merging and diverging conflicts. So basically, you're going to get side swipes more than like a right angle, or, you know, your typical left turn, you could have a through and a left turn, so it could be, you know, front to front crash.
Which a T-bone,
T-bone's like a westbound and a northbound hitting each other, so right angle or T-bone intersect crash. You can get that in a left turn depending on where they're positioned at.
Those can be quite catastrophic, especially at a higher speed. So one thing we also want to focus in on is for as an employer is look over your policies, your procedures, and your training for your employees. Do you have a distracted driving policy?
We do actually at the City of Tulsa. They, especially with cell phones, city employees are not allowed to use cell phones while they are driving. It's actually termination on the first offense.
So is that for handheld as well and hand-free as well?
Correct. It's for hand, because they actually put us through some training, and the nature of the call's the same, whether you're hands-free or you're have it in your hand. When you're talking to somebody in the car, generally, they're seeing the same things you are and can actually, help you if they see a dangerous situation, or they'll stop the conversation when you do because they see it. When you're on the phone, it's different. The other person can't see what you're seeing,
right.
And so your mind tends to go off more.
And then training as well is important for employers to make sure that employees understand to avoid distractions while driving, and training, and then some type of testing or way that you can prove they understood what the training was about. And then just knowing that if employees have these at-risk driving behaviors, such as in a hurry, speeding, distractions, and some of these other at-risk driving behaviors, eventually it's going to lead to a crash. And so it's important that employers stay on top of this and assess their employees for any at-risk driving behaviors. If they've had a collision, they need to go through some type of remedial action assessment as well to make sure they understand what the correct action is. We'll talk a little bit about the stop bar at an intersection. You can see a graphic there, and for example, the car on the left is red, it is stopped right in front of a painted white line. That's called the stop bar. What, Kurt, is the stop bar for?
Well, it's to indicate where vehicles should stop, and you'll notice there's a gap between that and the crosswalk. Generally, it's about 4 feet, and that, to protect the pedestrians so you're not encroaching into the crosswalk. And intersections that use detection, especially if it's loops, one way traffic signals detect if a car is there is to put loops of wire in the street, and those are usually based on where the stop bar is. At some intersections, there's such a big gap between the stop bar and the edge of curb, a small car can actually get completely beyond the stop bar and into an area where it won't be detected. Another way to detect vehicles is video detection, but they're also usually set up based on where the stop bar is at.
So when I was training employees, we focused in on the stop bar, and the idea was they stopped at the stop bar, and one of the reasons is to keep them out of the becoming collateral damage. If there is an intersection collision, if you're far enough back, you may avoid some of the impact or maybe all the impact of that intersection, the collision in the intersection. So it's important to employees to understand, stop behind the stop bar at an intersection if they're on red. Then we have an interesting situation here called the dilemma zone that I am not familiar with, but Kurt is.
Right, the dilemma zone, there was some studies done, I think University of Kentucky did the first one, and they found that if a driver is 2 seconds travel time from the intersection when the signal turns yellow, 90% of people will proceed on through the intersection. If they're 5 second travel time back and it turns yellow, 90% of drivers will stop. If you're in that gap between 2 and 5 seconds, that's where your dilemma zone is, that drivers get hesitant. They're not sure if they should speed up or slow down. Sometimes they'll do both, start to slow down, then speed up and go through it. And if you're the following vehicle and somebody jams on their brakes, you're more at risk of a rear end collision. So that's just, and there's some techniques we can do with detection to try to eliminate that dilemma zone, especially at isolated signals that are high speed, like above 40 miles an hour. But it's just something to be aware of.
So in training your employees about the dilemma zone, the 2 to 5 seconds, what we suggest is they start looking at the traffic light way ahead of the intersection, and what we call a stale green. It's been green for a long time. As you approach the intersection, understand that's probably going to go yellow-red pretty quick because it's been green for so long before you got to that intersection. So the strategy is cover your brake and be prepared to stop. Scan left, right, forward, left. That's what LRFL stands for, the acronym. Left, you're scanning the intersection as you approach it. Left, you're looking to your left, to your right, forward, and then left again. That's a good strategy in approaching an intersection on a green light anytime, whether it's a stale green light or a fresh green light. The other strategy is a 2 second pause. If you're stopped on a red light and your light turns green, you count to yourself 1001, 1002 prior to pressing the accelerator to go through the traffic light. Regardless if you're the first person in line or the second, third, or fourth, it doesn't matter. You give yourself that 2 second pause. As you're pausing, you're also scanning. You're looking left, right, forward, and left through the intersection again. This not only gives you an opportunity for the intersection to clear out, but also if there's a collision in that intersection, you also are hopefully able to avoid it by waiting those 2 seconds. And also it eliminates the start-stop issue for the car in front of you. Sometimes the car will start and then suddenly stop. If you give yourself that 2 second pause, you're less likely to rear end them. And then finally, the routes we take and the time of day are important as well to preventing red light running issues. So employers, if you know what are the safest routes for your drivers to take, that's important that you share that information with them or communicate back and forth between driver and employer. What are the safest routes we can take? What's the best time of day to go through some of these intersections that we know are more dangerous than others? So let's go to the next slide, Kurt. And I'm going the wrong way again. There we go. Left turns is our next issue. And the causes of left turns are unprotected left turns and sight restrictions. Let's talk about road design, Kurt, as a solution. And one of them is diverging diamond. Can you explain that?
Well, on the diverging diamond, basically you're separating out the left turns from the throughs. And if you're looking into the page, say that's northbound, these drivers that are left of center that are southbound, they're turning left here where this red car is, and they're separated from the through vehicles. So diverging diamond, that's a diamond interchange, but there's also a intersection called a contraflow intersection that basically is the same concept with just one intersection instead of a interchange. So that's, something that's starting to catch on. It's really done a lot for capacity, but also helps with left turn crashes. In your standard intersection, signalized intersection, you have three different types of left turns. Permissive, where you're just turning on a circular green. Protected permissive, where you start out with a green arrow, protected, and then it goes permissive with either a circular green or a flashing yellow arrow. And then protected only, where you can only turn on a solid green arrow. And typically, engineering-wise, we'll look at volumes and what kind of crashes we're having, what the speed limit is. And if you have a permissive-only intersection, you're having a lot of left turns. Sometimes you'll go back and put either protected permissive or protected only. When you make a permissive left turn, you have traffic coming at you, so you have to be able to judge the gap in traffic to safely go across. If you may be turning across 2 through lanes or 3 through lanes, and the more lanes you're turning across, the harder it is to judge that gap. And the faster they're coming at you, the harder it is. So that's just something for everybody to be aware of when you're trying to make a left turn. And so, those are some things we could do with engineering, contraflow intersection or protected only left turns.
You told me Tulsa is going to experience their first, is it diverging diamond or a contraflow?
Oh, diverging diamond. We're have 2 of them under design right now.
Good. Yeah, my first experience with a diverging diamond was in Joplin, Missouri, and it kind of freaked me out at first. I didn't really know what was going on, but I just followed the flow of traffic, and I saw immediately that, this is going to help with some of those more dangerous intersection crashes like left turns. So I think it's a good design. Hopefully it'll prove out to be a great design. The other strategy and solution would be a 2-second pause prior to going into a left turn. Once again, you're counting 1001, 1002, and you're scanning the intersection as you're making those counts. Also, know the routes that are the best routes to use. If they're going into very dangerous intersections, maybe there's a better route to take. Some companies even encourage right-hand turns rather than left-hand turns. And then know where your protected left turns are. Those are great. If you get an arrow, you're less likely to be able to be in a collision. And then remember to turn into your near lane if your vehicles and the space of those the lanes are capable of taking that near lane as you turn. And then the other thing to talk to your employees about, once again, is stop at that stop bar. If there is a site restriction, such as a building, billboard, tree, shrubbery, whatever it may be, they need to stop at that stop bar anyway and then creep forward after they've made their full stop to where they can have visibility. Anything else about site restrictions, Kurt, you can think of?
I guess the signal itself could have site restrictions. Sometimes you could have vegetation growing up near it, so you may not be able to see the signal as far back as you should. So when you're coming up on an intersection, just be cognizant of that.
What do you advise road users to do if they see a sight restriction? How would they contact, for example, in Tulsa anyway?
Well, in Tulsa, we have a 311 line that goes to our customer care center, so you can just report it that way. A lot of cities are going to that. Just depends on what jurisdiction you're in, if it's municipality or county. And usually the state DOTs would handle anything on the interstate system. In Tulsa, well, in Oklahoma, in fact, the cities maintain the traffic signals in all the cities, either the county or the city. The State Department does not. I know some states like Texas, it can be mixed where sometimes the city, sometimes the state.
Okay. And also in Oklahoma, if you're making a left-hand turn and you're out in the middle of an intersection waiting for it to clear, for example, I know if you're taking your CDL license test exam and you put yourself out in the middle of the intersection, they will fail you at that point. So I'm guessing that may be, I don't know for sure, but from an enforcement issue, is that a citable offense?
In Tulsa, it is. If you pull out into an intersection and you can pull in while it's yellow, but if it turns red on you while you're in the intersection, you can be ticketed.
Ah, okay. Good to know. The next issue we want to look at is rear-ending. And once again, distractions, probably the main reason for rear-ending. Sometimes it's maybe the driver is under the influence of something as well. Also, speed too fast, and hard stops. Once again, that's an aggressive, at-risk driving behavior that your employees need to understand. If they're going too fast or not paying attention, having to make hard stops, then that can cause rear ends. And then knowing or using proper vehicle space management. That means the space between the car in front of you and your vehicle as well, to prevent those start-stop type rear endings. So some of the strategies and solutions: once again, check your policies, procedures, and training. Your employees, you're training them on these particular issues. When I investigated collisions, if we had a rear-end collision and we were at fault, I always made sure that I checked out the vehicle very well, as well as the driver, because a lot of times it could be contributed to distraction or they're under the influence of something. Also, time management. Make sure they're giving themselves enough time to get where they're going so they don't have to speed and some of these other aggressive type behaviors to get where they're going on time. And then something I've seen many companies using is high-vis or visibility vehicles. They're putting reflective tape on the back of vehicles. They may even be putting certain types of brake lights that flash momentarily when they're hitting the brakes. Anything to make that car behind you realize you're coming to a stop. And I think here at the City of Tulsa, you all use high-vis on the back of your vehicles, right?
Yes, we do. We've gone to that.
And what is that? What kind of?
It's just a reflective sheeting, actually similar to what we put on traffic signs, but it's got encapsulated in some these cells that direct the light back at the driver.
Do you feel like that's helping your rear-end collisions issues?
I think it is, and I've even seen railroads do it on the side of boxcars, which is really nice. I've come up to a train at night before at a crossing that just had crossbucks and no lights, and the train really stood out.
So another strategy is spacing, making sure you have enough space between you and the car in front of you. Kurt, I'm going to ask you this, see if you know this question or the answer to this question. How far back should you be at an intersection behind the car in front of you?
Well, generally you want to be back far enough that you could see their tires on the pavement. Give yourself enough space. And another thing is, once you're sitting at a red light for a while, be careful you don't start creeping up on them slowly.
Yeah, absolutely. You're talking about the rear tires, right?
Yes, the rear tires.
So you're leaving yourself enough space between that car in front of you for several reasons. If there is an intersection collision, maybe you won't become collateral damage because you're far enough back. Or if you are rear-ended, Hopefully your car won't be pushed into the vehicle in front of you if you've left enough space. Also, it's a good evasive maneuver to leave yourself space so you can take evasive action if you need to, which means you're going to have to look in your mirrors constantly while you're at a stoplight to see if anybody's coming up behind you at a high speed, and possibly you could move out of the way if you needed to. Stop at the stop bar again. That's always a good strategy, as well as the 2-second pause before proceeding forward. That keeps you from hopefully rear-ending somebody if it's a start-stop situation. That happens a lot. I see a lot of that happen in intersections. We talked about the other day, Kurt, when somebody, maybe you're in the straight-through lane and the left turn signal turns green, and accidentally you move forward because you think it's your light. You're not paying complete attention. So that space can be very helpful to you. Right. And then the last thing we want to touch on is vulnerable users. For example, those would be motorcyclists, bicyclists that are sharing the road with. We want to leave enough space behind them or on the side of them in case we're rear-ended. We're not pushed into them because they are very vulnerable. It's a possibility if we hit them from behind, they're going to go flying off of their motorcycle or bicycle and could incur some very bad injuries. So hopefully that's helpful to you all. If you have any questions, we have an expert here with us on traffic engineering. So you may have a question like, how long do the lights actually turn green? How long is it? Is there an average, like 10 seconds, 30 seconds? You go by. I realize that every intersection is going to be different, but is there a kind of an average?
Well, depends on the intersection. Like you say, intersections can be what we call either pre-timed or fixed time, where each time around, it's giving the same amount of green time for a given movement. We can also have actuated intersections where you have detection with either cameras or loops or radar. And then it's going to vary from cycle to cycle how much time it gives for each left turn, for each through movement. Here in Tulsa, everything downtown pretty much is fixed time. Everything outside is actuated. And so the green time will vary. And so when you're coming up on a stale green, like you mentioned, you really don't know when it's going to change. And then the yellow and all red intervals will be constant for each cycle within a particular timing plan.
So when your light turns red, how long is it before their light turns green?
Well, that's an all red interval, so it depends. It can be you don't have to use an all red interval. They could just time it with a yellow. Most intersections get timed with some all red, 1 to 3 seconds or so. There's some different ways of timing yellow and all red intervals. Some agencies just do the same amount of time for each intersection, say 3 seconds of yellow and 2 seconds of all red. Some use kind of a rule of thumb where for each 10 mile an hour in posted speed, they'll give a second of all of yellow. So 40 miles an hour, they do 4 seconds of yellow, and then they might throw some all red in. Another way to do it is, the way I do it is I use kinematic equations, which are based on physics, and it takes into account the width of the intersection, the prevailing speed of the vehicles. You choose an average size vehicle, and it calculates how long it takes to get across that intersection. So I use the yellow and all red based on that.
Well, I think we're out of time, but we appreciate your audience today. Hopefully this was helpful to you. If you have any questions, please put them out there, and we can attempt to answer them. Deanne, we'll give it back to you.
Okay. Thank you so much, Kurt and Eddie. I don't see that there's any questions in the chat box, and I think that's because you guys did such a great job of answering all the questions about green, yellow, and red lights and intersections. So it was a great educating webinar, and I thank both of you, and I thank everyone who attended. We know everyone's time is valuable, and we hope you gained some useful information that you can take back to your organizations and put to use. If you will, take a quick moment and fill out the post-survey webinar. We would greatly appreciate that. And please check our website for future webinars. And with that, we thank you again and have a great rest of your afternoon. And that concludes our webinar. Thank you.